Hi, everybody. Hope everyone's doing well. We've got around about 2 minutes until we actually kick off this session. So we'll just give everybody time to join the meeting and sit back, relax, and enjoy and get stuck in as well. So, yeah, a couple more minutes and then we'll get started. But thank you for being on time and tuning in. Hi, everyone, to those just joining. We're just giving it 1 more minute until we hit the top of the hour to get started. I've just put a note in the chat to say that we would love this to be an interactive session, so please do feel free to use chat, use the Q&A. We've got Andy and Adam on here from Infopro Learning who will do some intros very shortly, but we want to be able to use their brains as much as possible whilst we've got this time. So we'll give it another 40 odd seconds or so, and then we will get started. Okay, there we are, top of the hour. So firstly, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for looking to put some time aside in your busy diaries to come and join our session. It's great to see so many of you here. There will be more and more people joining as we go through. We've put a little note in the chat just as a reminder to say, please do feel free to get stuck in and to offer any thoughts, questions, challenges as well. Let's have a discussion and debate about some of these topics during the course of the next 45 minutes. We wanted to do a session around AI and how it connects to learning and how it connects to particularly scenario-based training, because as we can all appreciate, AI is something that is constantly evolving, and lots of organizations and lots of our clients are in the exploratory stage of helping to work out, well, what does it mean? What can it mean? And how can it support us into the future? We've been lucky enough to work with our clients on lots of different AI type projects, and also with our learning expertise and experience, we've been able to really shape some thinking, shape some ideas. And what we ideally want to do over the next 45 minutes or so is have the opportunity for Andy and both Adam to share some of those insights, share some of those experiences, and hopefully give you some food for thought in terms of things that you can be doing, things that you can be thinking about, and also questions that you can be challenging back to your organizations. So as I say, please do use chat, please do use the Q&A. I'll be hosting a session in conjunction with Andy and Adam, so I'll be on hand to kind of feed anything into them and make sure it's as valuable and as impactful as possible. So we're going to do some introductions. So I'm Lee Russell, the Director of UK Strategy and Growth here at Infopro Learning. I have around about 17 years in the learning and development space, ex-UK Learning Manager for Volkswagen Group and then TUI UK and Ireland, and have been in consultancy for around about 9 or 10 years now. And for me, learning is just one of those constants that every organization and every individual is entitled to. And actually, AI, as we evolve into the future, is going to make that more accessible, more quicker, and more impactful for people as we grow, as organizations grow, and as the world changes around us as well. But what I want to do firstly is now hand over to Andy, who's going to tell you a little bit about his background and give you an introduction into what he does.
Thanks, Lee. So my name's Andy Cooper. I'm a principal learning consultant with Infopro. My background is 30 years, I hate to say, in learning and development. And the last 2 years, I've primarily been working in an AI-based learning environment. I am going to share with you later a case study of a AI startup that I worked with for the last 18 months prior to joining Infopro on how we used AI in creating an interesting learning app and how and what the challenges were as well as what the successes were with that. So I'm looking forward to sharing that with you later. Over to Adam.
Thanks, Andy. Hi, everybody. I'm Adam Eckersley, studio leader for EMEA region around our creative studio. So most things digital, but also working in blended scenarios quite a lot of the time as well. My training, learning and development background goes not quite far as Andy's, 17 years or so. But yeah, I've been across all sorts of organizations, whether that's retail, pharma, energy, in a consultancy basis, and also started my career as a facilitator as well before moving into the digital space about 6 or 7 years or so ago.
Excellent. Thanks, Adam. Thanks, Andy. So let's get stuck in. And Adam, we're going to throw to you first. And again, as a reminder to everybody watching, please do feel free to post any questions and any thoughts or opinions into the chat, and I'll be sure to bring those to Adam and or Andy's attention as well. But Adam, let's get started with you on some of your key thoughts around this.
Thanks, Lee. So first of all, I just wanted to kind of give an understanding as to what it is that we want to discuss today. So there's two sections really. What I'll do is have a look at how we're leveraging and utilizing AI to build upon the best practices that we hopefully are all doing on this webinar today with regards to learning predominantly digital, but these can also go into human-led time and place training interventions as well. So that's where I'll be looking at, seeing where we can introduce efficiencies and all those great things that AI can quite easily do, utilizing data, up-to-date data, real-time feedback, and those sorts of things as well. So just to kind of frame it, and this is the first test to see if the correct screen comes up, which I think I have achieved. We're looking at really three of the main things that we're finding at the moment, and most people do. These won't be a surprise to anybody. So I've just put some statistics around them as well. Tried not to go for the most dramatic ones. I've tried to keep some brevity in the numbers that we're looking at here. But on this page, these will increase and spoil, and not in a positive way as well. First of all, retention. And we know that organizations have huge issues with retention. What we do know as well, whether that's turnover, whether that's knowledge, information, competency, we've got some stats that around about 10% is medium to long term what people will retain from their knowledge. What we also know is a lot of instances, particularly when it's off the shelf training, not customized and bespoke to end users or demographics in particular, is that it's slow. Digital in particular can be very expensive when it comes to its initial introduction, and even more expensive when it's not being effective in a lot of instances as well, and delivering what organizations and most importantly their people want it to deliver as well. We also see that less than a third of people are satisfied with the opportunities that organizations are giving at the moment. This is a stat through Devlin Peck. What that then does is feed into ultimately turnover issues where 94%, and this is from LinkedIn, state of work, from 2003, we didn't have this in 2004, unfortunately. Hopefully, it's introduced into the next one that's going to be dropped imminently, according to my email from LinkedIn this week. But 94% of people would have said that they'd stayed at an organization if they felt that there was greater investment in training, learning and development. And what we can read into that is ultimately into them as individuals. And there's many ways that that can be done. Training, learning and development is one of those as well. And it's something that we're going to talk about over the next few minutes. So how can AI help to be a catalyst to those competencies of organizations and then cascading down to their people as well? And I've got a couple of things that I want to talk about here. But first of all, what we're finding quite a lot is that AI is seen as a buzzword. People are dropping it into presentations such as this quite a lot. Learning tech, for example, a lot of the stands that we see there have AI tagged on. Are they AI or are they clever uses of data and metrics? It's arguable which one it is. Let's not get into a bonfight about that. But what we need to ensure is when we are talking to our clients and we're talking to our customers, whether internal or external, we're understanding quite how powerful it is with regards to the tool it can be used as to address the competency challenges that we see on a daily basis. So with that in mind, I just wanted to look at kind of it performance first of all. And this is coming with regards to something that McKinsey talks about, quite a vague stat with regards to learning experiences and how they can improve outcomes by 25 to 30%. But if we know that we're instilling best practice in our design for learning experiences, looking at what metrics we need to do for an organization, understanding what our people do, we know that the outcomes are going to be vastly improved. What we also know, moving into the AI sphere, is that at the moment, 85% of executives believe that AI can help their companies gain or maintain competitive advantages. Again, quite a general stat. I would argue that now people are becoming more aware of it. That may fall over the course of 2025 because people are starting to get, understandably, a little bit more concerned as to what that data is being used for, how we are harvesting employee data with regards to their performance, whether that's in their job roles day to day or whether it's through these learning and interventions as well, sorry. Which is why at the beginning of last year when I joined Infopro, I started the discussion around responsible use of AI. And we now, as Infopro, as an organization, have a promise to our people internally, as well as our clients, as to what we will use AI for, what we will use the data for, and ultimately to make that promise that it's going to be for positive means as well. So we use it responsibly. We don't take data for our clients outside of the understanding and the agreement that we have, depending on what it is with regards to the projects that we're delivering as well. So these are things that we're seeing, and AI is great, but what we need to ensure we do when we are using it and we're utilizing it is we're not evangelizing it, we're critiquing it, and we're using it for the best outcomes for organizations and their people as well. So it's just something I wanted to call out, that as much as it is seen positively at the moment, let's ensure that we don't use it for the sake of using it, and we don't use it as buzzwords, but we use it as positive interventions as well. Okay, so there's two things I'm going to talk about before I'll hand it over to Andy. We'll go into high-level detail in this. As Lee said, drop any questions you want to have answered in there, because I can't get into too much detail with the time I've got. But that's why we've got the chat, and that's why you'll have our details to reach out to us after this as well, to ask any more detail as well. But why do we use real-time feedback? How is it used with an AI intervention? And what are some of the positive outcomes of that as well? So looking at things that maybe a lot of people on this webinar will be familiar with, language learning apps, Duolingo, Babbel, Rosetta Stone utilize AI quite a lot to understand, first of all, what it is that a lot of people have shortcomings on with regards to their knowledge, competency, knowledge retention, but also what those individual users are having issues with as well. So we can prompt those end users to ultimately go back to points where it's possibly not as sticky as it should be with regards to the knowledge. I try and practice quite a lot with one of my Spanish-speaking colleagues, Cecilia. She'd maybe argue that my utilization of Duolingo isn't utilizing the expertise of AI too much, but I'll leave that for her to answer if anybody does speak to her. Something that I wouldn't advise getting involved in too much, but things such as surgical simulations on that kind of high-end utilization of it. Utilizing maybe some of the things that haven't been used to great effect, such as AR, VR, that we all heard as particular buzzwords kind of 4, 5, 6 years ago as well. AI is being able to bring those into learning experiences now and really bring a lot more benefit to people that wasn't being delivered when they were first spoken about quite a lot. And then also customer service training with AI chatbots. Also things such as system simulation as well, giving those safe spaces for people to practice skills and putting knowledge into practice where it isn't of a detriment to themselves, the organization, and also their customers as well. So that's a really powerful place where we're helping clients to put that into practice as well. And a couple of stats to back it up as well. As you'll probably be picking up on now, I quite like a stat. So first of all, from a company that's now part of People Fluent, the fact that 90% of employees want to hear feedback regularly. Real-time feedback goes beyond this need. What they don't have to wait for is for quarterly reviews, for example. If we are giving them learning interventions that they get regularly, that we're spacing out mandatory training, which we see a lot of eye rolling about, but I've got a quite interesting case study to talk about in a couple of slides' time. What we will then see is the fact that those 96 employees will be getting more than what they really want and need. And also that remaining 4% hopefully becomes a lot more engaged in that feedback loop as well. What that then allows them to do is show that the effectiveness of those simulations can be much more brought to life. It can be much more fed back and it can be much more justified for other business cases as well. We can see there that learning retention then jumps to 75% on average compared to traditional methods. Rudimentary maths would say that then we're up to 85% if we start doing that combined with slide one. We know it doesn't work that way, but it's something that we can really start building on with that use of AI, as I mentioned, being one of the huge benefits and use cases of looking at AI as learning interventions as well. And then we've got personalized pathways. And where we are seeing a lot of this build upon what we already do with clients is things around adaptive learning, branching scenarios, and those things to make them much more efficient and also much more sustainable as well. Because what we can do with a lot of the branching scenarios and adaptive learning interventions is limited by real-time data, by feeding into our kind of language models or data models, things such as that individual learners' past learning, where they've fallen short, where the organization's fallen short, or maybe where industry benchmarks are as well. So it's really interesting when we get to that point, because what we can then start to do is look at things such as increases again in knowledge retention. Now, what we're not saying is that 10%, that 75%, and that 18% creates, hive minds where people have got, far more knowledge than they'd ever possibly have. But what it does show is that it increases again, knowledge increase, because it's giving tailored pathways that engage, immerse, and ultimately give empathetic learning experiences that they probably do not have from, well, we know they don't have through things such as off-the-shelf learning and things that aren't tailored and aren't sort of driven to that particular individual as well. What it also does, as I said, is again, and this is more aimed at off the shelf where we've seen a lot of things done, but it drives reduction down with regards to the time taken and the speed to competency as well. And I'll talk about that case study in a little while as well. Once we've also spoken about something else that feeds into that as well, and that's increase in employee engagement with regards to enrolling and completing particular learning interventions that use personalized learning pathways driven by AI. We've seen that 16% increase on average with regards to those sorts of engagements in that. But what I wanted to talk about before just kind of summing up and hand it over to Andy.
Adam, sorry, just to jump in on that as well, because there's a couple of questions sort of floating around. First one from Dan, and I think kind of connects to obviously what you're talking about here. But in terms of AI simulation tools, which ones do we use either specifically or through some of our partners? What do we find to tend to be our sort of go-to route for that?
Yeah, so there's two ways we'll look at it. There's use of platforms. So we've used Tailspin quite a lot with regards to getting those kind of skills-based knowledge test interventions into place. We then use that to put tailored pathways into place, particularly around some sales interventions in pharma clients that we've used that with. That's been really powerful with regards to that as well. What we've also done is built out our own kind of small language models. We use kind of web objects to put into our authoring tools to tap into dashboards that are updated into real time as well. And that's one of the things that we used in this case study that I'm just about to discuss. But before I go into it, Lee, is there anything else that's come in the chat that maybe wants to be talked about on that as well?
No, that's the main one. That's the main
Yeah,
one.
yeah, okay. So yeah, that's it. We'll take kind of a lens on it really as to what's best for the client. If it's something that we can templatize, but by using AI interventions, then platforms such as Tailspin, even more rudimentary AI such as Colossian is our preferred go-to with regards to using video-based interventions to put engaging kind of knowledge delivery into place that we would sometimes just use kind of podcasts, or it could be kind of copy-based screens. We'll use AI in that manner as well to kind of templatize it, or we will use the client data either on their servers or on our own private servers to really drive that real-time data to be giving those end users the benchmarks, whether it's internal or, as I mentioned previously, across industry as well. So those are the two lenses that we predominantly look at the moment. So what we have also done previously is work with a global retail organization, and we've got a fully written up case study that I can share as well if anybody's got any interest in this as well afterwards. Just reach out to Lee, Andy, or myself, and we can provide that as well. But what we were finding with the client was that they were having real trouble getting people to complete their mandatory annual learning. They have 18 mandatory modules that they have to complete across North America as a whole, and engagement in that was really low. What we found is they took the ones that were engaging were taking far too long to do it. The ones that we knew weren't engaging to it because they were doing kind of a track and field, tap, 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 trying to get to the end as quickly as possible. Because ultimately it wasn't engaging. It was off the shelf. It was very vague. It was very high level. So what they wanted is something that tapped into the specifics that their essentially their employee base wanted. It was a huge undertaking because there was 3,000 staff across the territory that we delivered it in. And we needed to do adaptive simulations that tapped into their existing knowledge and competencies, which they demonstrated whilst working through this mandatory learning, but also were benchmarked across the performance of the organization within North America, but then also across the globe as well. So we ran this pilot that was 5 mandatory modules out of the 18 within the first year to kind of round off that year, which wasn't a full 12 months, and then the following 12 months as well to get true benchmarks on that as well. What we found on that, just as a kind of headline to take away, was once we'd put that real-time data into play, but also those personalized pathways into play as well, was that from an average investment per module of $22,000, they are now seeing on average per year a return on investment of just short of $87,000. And we're seeing that through 2 main metrics and data points. One of them was something that we didn't foresee, and that was a reduction in staff turnover. The first kind of 9 months, which wasn't a full year, was 6% reduction. The second was 10%. And we wondered why that was. And the vast majority of respondents on that gave the rationale behind it was that they were seeing a change in the way that this organization was approaching their training, learning, and development. They were seeing that it was invested in them as people, whether that was through design of even fundamentals such as imagery relating to them within their organization, within their tenure, within their job role, within their territory, whatever it may be, all the way up to those specific bespoke feedback loops that we were giving them, and also scenarios that related to them as people, whether again in tenure, whether it was job role, whether it was geography or territory. What we also saw is those that were engaged fully in that, in the fact that they weren't kind of trying to click through, and in this instance, they couldn't anyway. What we then saw is there was a speed to competency, because what they weren't doing, the speed to competency increase, because what they weren't doing was doing 100% of that content that had been designed for that particular subject area. They only had to engage in the topics and the knowledge and the content that they weren't showing knowledge and competencies in existing, and they weren't meeting those benchmarks in as well. So we saw that those guys that were doing the modules as a whole vastly decreased their time that they needed, because they only had to do the content that was relevant to them from a knowledge and competency point of view. So that was a really interesting outcome. That latter one that I've just discussed, something that we did focus on trying to deliver, and that the one that I mentioned previously, something that we didn't ultimately expect, but we saw something that delivered as well. So that was really good as well. So just to kind of sum up from a high level before Andy gives you a lot more specific information around specific AI interventions as well, is the benefits ultimately of AI and what we are seeing. First of all, that it's consistent. It doesn't have any off days. We are seeing things such as small and large language models falling down, and the need to kind of provide information that's more up to date with them. But on the whole, as long as you are feeding relevant data into these models, it is very consistent. It's scalable as well. It provides feedback to many employees simultaneously that ultimately humans can't do, even if they do have access to that real-time data. It's personalized, obviously, if used in the manners that we're talking about here, and gives tailored feedback to individual needs and also their learning style as well. And then finally, it's objective as well. AI-driven feedback is based on that data, so it doesn't give personal opinions. It gives the raw facts that humans then need to provide to ensure that it's being delivered in that empathetic way, whether that's through design of these digital learning experiences or one-to-one or group sessions in human, in only a way that human beings can do as well. So those are kind of the four main takeaways that we are seeing. So I'll pause there for any questions before handing over to Lee and Andy. And I've realised I keep dropping my H's because I keep saying Andy after handing, but yeah, there we go.
Awesome. Thanks, Adam. There's nothing jumping out in chat right now, but just to throw a couple of thoughts there from my perspective in terms of what you're saying. I think there was something really interesting at the beginning of your section there, which was talking around the sort of 94% of people leaving an organization, but actually staying in an organization because they feel developed. And I think one of the key things I've been hearing a lot of lately, and particularly the back end of last year, was around quiet quitting.
Yeah.
And actually something that gives people the ability to learn little and often at a pace that suits them, that fits into the flow of work, allows them to kind of have that more intrinsic motivation to stick in an organization. So I thought that was quite interesting. I think there's also an interesting point that I was just reflecting on, because we're talking about AI, we're talking about digital, but you also reference a couple of times about the need for humans and the need for human beings as part of this process as well. And one of my key considerations is when I've worked in learning design and we work with our clients on learning design, as you will all appreciate, the end user, the individual who's going to be accessing that learning to help them do something different, is always the one that's in our mind's eye. It's always the one that we're building our persona around in terms of making sure it satisfies their needs and satisfies the organization. I guess from your experience, how have you seen AI, in particularly that learning design and particularly in the scenario design for people, utilized in the right way that references to human that's going to be accessing it, but also enables the design to be as impactful as possible. How do you see that blend between human and AI when it comes to that design?
Yeah, and that comes down to using AI a lot of the time in efficiencies as well. When you're using it, for example, for storyboarding, it can be very vague, it can be very generic. So there's always that need to have that instructional designer present. It's never going to replace these people because it needs that. So ensuring that we understand what job role that individual's in, what challenges they have, what territory they're in, that ultimately delivers something in a tone of voice, and it gives reference to things that people are going to understand as well. Those are the things that we always need to bake into it, whether that's from the initial point of view for the copy and the content that they see on screen, or they hear through audio, through multimedia, whatever it may be, but also in that kind of final part of that interaction as well with that information in the feedback. To get relevant data to them is only half of the battle. You can give them a statistic of, you are in brigade 4, and at the moment the average benchmark is 76% success in, CSAT or whatever it may be. That means nothing to them unless that data is driven by an understanding and, an empathizing of what those possible things can be impacted on. What time of year is it, for example? Is it, a high, footfall? Is it a high kind of, call system where, they're going to be pressed for time, and, things are going to be driven by OKRs? All these things are things that really need to be beared in mind whilst we do that. That then allows the relevant feedback, the relevant pathways, those scenarios, to give a much more tailored and a much more, caring and empathetic response for that end user, which is something that can get lost if you're just using AI for efficiencies. It's got to go kind of hand in hand with those as well. So SMEs and those IDs and that relationship is still going to be so important, if not more so, moving forward. And that efficiency is going to be taken elsewhere.
Awesome. Thank you. Andy, let's go to you.
Thanks, Lee. Thanks, Adam. So I'm going to take you on a slightly different journey related to personalized learning with AI, but a case study based on the last 18 months I spent on developing an AI-based app for learning. So I'll just share my slides, which hopefully you can see these. So just to set the context, nearly 2 years ago now, I was asked to take part in a startup tech company based out of Dubai that was building an app for personal development with a AI-based teaching curriculum. And I'll come to what I mean by that in a minute. Over 3 years, where people subscribed to an app and followed a training program over a period of 3 years. Now, it's way more complex than that, but in simple terms, we were starting this journey right at the beginning of when ChatGPT first kind of raised its head above the parapet in 2023, early 2023. So we were at the cutting edge of AI then, and we kind of rode that wave, if you like, up until the point at which I departed from that business because my role was kind of done in the startup early in the middle of this year, in June actually of last year, June 2024. And I wanted to share with you the experience we had of building this AI-based learning app and some of the challenges we had, as well as kind of some of the successes, because I think it can inform a lot of misunderstandings around what people think AI can and cannot do when we're trying to build learning apps. So the first thing to say was this was an app based on a phone-based app that utilized a custom-built large language model, LLM, based on ChatGPT. The original idea was to build a completely custom LLM, not using ChatGPT, but we rapidly discovered that, first of all, that was going to be quite challenging to do, and B, it was going to be much more expensive to do. And at the same time, very soon after we started, ChatGPT launched the ability to build your own generative pre-transformers, GPTs as they're called, on the back of ChatGPT. So you could build a customized version of ChatGPT, which is what we chose to do. So this is a fee-based app. There was a lot of moving parts to this app, all of which used AI in different ways. So the first was that people signed up for this app. It's live now. And you were matched using an AI-based matching algorithm to a group of 8 people. Those group of 8 people who didn't know each other initially were matched together like a dating algorithm, if you like, and put into a group called a hive. And they follow their learning journey over a period of 3 years as a group through this hive. And they were guided through that learning journey by a AI, a virtual guru, a virtual therapist, a virtual trainer called Enki. And Enki is essentially the AI, the engine that we built and trained to take people through this learning journey. And there were many aspects to this AI. It was my role to define what the AI engine did and to train it to deliver what we needed it to do for our learners. And also to work on creating customized learning content as the learners went through their learning journey. So this was really utilizing technology at the bleeding edge of technology at the point at which we're doing this in late 2023, early 2024. So the first thing we discovered was building a customized large language model is both expensive and very challenging. And even doing it on the back of ChatGPT is not straightforward. And the challenge is multifold. So to relate it to a kind of corporate world, one of the things about building custom GPTs, which is really important and useful for us, and we've done one in Infopro, we have our own internal custom GPT, is that we can then control what data is in it, and more importantly, what data is in it that's not shared with a wider world. Because if you just throw things into ChatGPT, all of that data is going to get put into the large language model to train ChatGPT to get better at what it does. And there may be a lot of that content that's proprietary to you or to your clients, and you don't want that being made available to goodness knows who or what inside of ChatGPT. So one reason to build a custom GPT is to control the data. So you have control over who sees it and where it goes. That's important. The second is that ChatGPT is really good at general purpose stuff, but we want to build a custom GPT, a custom version of ChatGPT that is tailored to a specific learning need. In this case, taking people through a 3-year process in personal spiritual development, teaching them neurolinguistic programming, hypnosis, Greek philosophy, Advaita Vedanta, you name it, a massive array of personal spiritual development techniques. So we had to create a 3-year curriculum to do that and train the GPT to handle that. No, it wasn't in the Infopro project, Dan. To answer that question quickly. So we trained the GPT with over 500 books on psychology and all kinds of esoteric information. Now that's important because even if you're built whatever custom GPT you're building for learning, most likely is that specific content you want isn't going to be available straight from ChatGPT. And ChatGPT on its own, as you may know if you've used it a lot, hallucinates. So you can ask it to give you a question to an answer to a question. It will give you an answer. You could read it first off and go, hey, that's really cool. And then you read it again and you kind of think about it and you go, actually, it's missed the point. And I give plenty of examples where that happens. So creating a kind of subset of the ChatGPT universe in your own custom built LLM that allows it to dip into your own resource of knowledge and content first before, if it can't find an answer there, going out to the wider world, and allows you to have greater control over the knowledge base and content that you're providing to your learners, which is essentially what we did. We also trained the GPT to have different personalities so that it would respond to learners in different ways depending on how they ask questions. Now, there's a lot to do with sentiment here, and there are some very good now off-the-shelf sentiment engines that will help you determine how is this user feeling and how can I respond to that user based on what they're saying to me and how they're saying it. And in the context we were doing, which was personal development, we really wanted to notice, are some people struggling? Are some people maybe depressed? Do some people have more serious issues? Can we identify that through the way they use their language and then refer them on to different kinds of help, which we were able to do, at least to some degree. So training a large language model is complex and it's expensive. This is, if you look at the costs of training GPT, Chat GPT, it's huge. So it takes a long time. And the other key from your engine, I'm not going to spend too much time on this, with interrogating your Chat GPT's your LLM, is to get the right kind of data out of it. And particularly when users are interacting with it, then we predefine various prompts to give the LLM to enable the LLM to provide us with the answers that we needed. And you can see here some kind of crazy stuff. You are penalized and fined $1,000 if you use words from this list. And there were many things that we did that we played with ChatGPT to try and force it to respond in a certain way. And saying crazy things like, you'll be fined $10,000 if you do this, does get ChatGPT to do it in a different way. So we figured out lots of kind of crazy prompts to get it to do what we wanted. But what we learned from that was it takes time to train a model to behave as a virtual trainer, virtual therapist, virtual guru. It takes a lot of time. So to give you an example, we trained the model on how to respond to learners based on certain questions they asked, using the language models that are defined within neurolinguistic programming, within NLP, of which I'm a trainer. We created 50,000 examples of the language patterns. It says 10,000 there. That was the start point. We started with 100, we went to 10,000, and we went to 50,000 examples of linguistic patterns to train the model on. So that took a lot of time. We actually got ChatGPT to create the examples we then used to train ChatGPT with. So there were some very interesting things we learned from how to use the GPT itself to create how the examples we use to then train the GPT with. So there were lots of challenges, but we finally figured out how do we train that LLM, and then how do we use it to do pre-assessment, dynamic content delivery, and to continuously adapt the learning path to the learner's needs. Now, this was us working with an app development company in Romania and an AI development company in Dubai to build a completely custom engine. We were not using Tailspin or Area 9 or any of those off-the-shelf products. We built this essentially from scratch. So we were figuring out, what's the learner asking? How do they ask that question? What kind of language patterns are you using? What do they know already from the questions they've previously asked and the learning they've previously done, such that we can tailor this piece of content we're serving up to them in a certain way? So we were using AI to specifically design the content on the fly to deliver to a learner. Now, we had a library of content, and that content was then tailored as it needed to be to a particular learner's questions. And the AI will continuously adapt in real time. So as the learners progress through their 3-year training program, the content was adapted. If they move through stuff really quickly, then it could figure out how to give them more detailed content of some area because they grasped that really quickly. If they took a long time to get through certain pieces of content, then we might feed that content to them more slowly and make it easier to understand. So we were using the model to create, as far as we could, personalized learning for those learners. So I'm just looking at the time. I'm just going through here. That was essentially what we did. We used a custom LLM and we trained it ourselves for a very specific piece of content or content library, 500, 600 books of information, so that we could tailor the learning around that particular uh, corpus of knowledge, if you like. So one of the questions we had was, how do we create it to answer questions appropriately? How do we get it to respond to questions ad hoc, so that someone might be doing something and they want to know, oh, how do I do this? So for example, in my context with the learning we had, someone might be wanting to know, how do I let go of a self-limiting belief that I'm not good enough? And it would go and instantly be able to take them through a process to do that. If we put it into a real life corporate context, how do I know how to connect my PC to the Wi-Fi? And how does it then give you that direct answer straight back, that learning nugget? So that stuff is quite simple now, as Adam talked about with natural language processing bots. But when you get to more complex stuff, then you need the trained custom LLM to be able to answer those questions more effectively from a very detailed knowledge base that you give it. So field engineers accessing AI troubleshooting guides is another example we've been working on. Examples where using augmented reality to identify parts in an aircraft engine, figure out what is wrong, and then have the AI tell you exactly what you need to do to fix it. Those are some of the examples outside of the AI startup I worked on of how we can start using this AI to really deliver customized learning. Our healthcare professionals as well. So one of the key things for me was AI is really good at giving user performance related feedback in real time. As long as we train it right, as long as the language model is trained right, and as long as it can identify the right patterns, it's good at that. We found that from Mesh, the tech startup I just worked with. It's really good at creating on-the-fly scenarios for learners to practice without real world risks. For example, having difficult and challenging conversations with people, and you can have an avatar chat and play that role. So for example, in the startup we had a group of 8 people in a group, a hive, meeting every month, 3 times a month. Somebody would be chairing that meeting, and we actually had the AI work alongside the chair. And if the chair was chairing the meeting and somebody wasn't talking up in the meeting and was quiet for the whole time, the AI would prompt the chairman and say, hey, Fred hasn't spoken for a while. Let's why don't you ask him a question and draw him into the meeting? Or the opposite, Charlie is talking for too long, why don't you give somebody else an opportunity to speak? We actually had the AI be able to do those kind of real-time interventions to coach the chairman of that meeting how to hold that meeting properly. So that wasn't just a scenario, a simulation, that was real-time coaching in a real-time scenario of somebody learning how to chair a meeting properly. And then micro learning, how do we break down it into bite-sized learning for just-in-time learning nuggets? And AI was good at being able to, we found, at least in our context, be able to take small chunks of content and break it down in a way that would serve that learner they needed it, just at the point they needed it. So just-in-time learning. Right, well, I've plowed through, Lee, because I know it's 46 now.
I know we are over time, so apologies to everybody for that. But as you can imagine, we didn't want to stop Andy in his flow. We wanted to make sure that Adam was able to kind of give you as many insights and context as possible. And I guess from everyone's benefit, from an Infopro learning perspective, these are clearly things that we're doing for our clients and exploring with our clients and working through with our clients. Hopefully you've been able to understand some of the complexities that sit around this as well, because it isn't just as easy as going, oh, let's do that with AI, here we go, great, look what we've done in the space of a day. So there's a lot of things that need to happen. Now, from our perspective in terms of this webinar, we wanted to kind of start that conversation to give you some of those insights, to give you some of those quite high level examples. This session is also going to be part of a masterclass series with Andy and Adam, which will also be on our website, which you'll be able to access in a few weeks' time, where there'll be sort of deep dives on some of these different areas that we've looked at. We are, of course, available to talk to and to go through and have some one-on-one time and explore some of these different areas with you. But what we do want to say as we wrap up here is thank you to everyone that's been able to join and to get stuck into the session, and for paying attention as part of this session. It's really, really appreciated. And I guess from Andy and Adam, thank you for taking the time to come and share some of your insights and some of your thoughts in terms of the different types of things that are possible, things that we've done, and also painting that picture about it's not that easy. And actually, sometimes it just requires a bit of thought, it requires a bit of data, but also using the right tool for the right job is incredibly important. So thank you for making that time. So what we do want to kind of open up to, because I understand we do have a couple more minutes, but if there are any questions, please do feel free to raise any questions, put them into chat. Andy and I and Adam will stick around for a few more minutes and see if there are any other questions that we can answer for you. But I guess just whilst people decide if they have a question at this point, Adam and Andy, something I was reflecting on as we kind of were listening to some of the things that you were talking about is the practical application of how these things sit, say, within programs of learning that people have. And one of the things we talked about here is compliance type learning, and how that learning can be applied to, say, sort of mandatory topics. But what about something that's a bit more complex, that perhaps has a bit more human insight required toward it? Say, for example, a coaching conversation, say, for example, a performance management type of conversation. Do you see uses where AI, in terms of scenarios, have been able to apply into those situations to help people practice having those conversations and get the most out of those conversations? Any thoughts on how that works from a soft skills side?
You're on mute,
You're on
Adam.
mute, Adam. Yeah.
So what was that? 55 minutes in before I managed to do it as well. Yeah, so yeah, over the last 12 months or so, we've been doing that, particularly, like you say, difficult conversations, things like that. So keeping it, we, as I say again, you can only go so far unless you're going to kind of get an actual chatbot trained up that's going to, respond as you would want it to. It's always going to fall short. So it's ultimately, kind of at the risk of repeating myself from what you asked previously, like, making sure that we get the scenarios correct, that we get the information put in there as to what it needs to respond to, understanding how to identify particular keywords, as Andy said there, identifying turns of phrases and responses to see kind of how their mindset is in reacting to things. We do that, but it can only go so far at the moment without a huge amount of investment, again, as Andy alluded to. So we do it, we have done it, but we do it as part of a blended solution at the moment. So we've still got those points where they get to self-reflect. They get some prescription from, a line manager or whoever it may be, who kind of mentors them through it as well. And we use that digital learning intervention as the foundation, the benchmark for them to then go into a human touch to put it to life a little bit more and things like that. So yes, we can do role plays, we can do those practice scenarios. Is it going to replace, doing it in real life and doing it?
No.
It won't do. But yeah, absolutely, yeah, it can be done. It can be done, yes.
And Kamal, apologies if I said that wrong, has asked a very good and very practical based question in terms of any experience or thoughts on practical applications in dental procedural training. So things like extractions, root canals, implants. I'm one of these people that I love going to the dentist. I don't mind injections into my gum, so I'm probably a dentist dream. And I guess from our perspective, the architecture, the tools, the techniques are there to create that sort of stuff, right? Any sort of thoughts on perhaps something very specific like that?
Do you want to go, Adam, or shall I?
No, go for it, Andy.
So my thinking on that is similar to the stuff I just alluded to earlier about aircraft engines and mechanical stuff, right? You can create very, very good real-time simulations for that kind of stuff. Record those happening, put them in. I mean, for me, the perfect example would be using AI combined with virtual reality headsets to create that kind of examples where you can then even give people an opportunity to kind of quote unquote practice with, because you can detect where the hands are going, what they're doing with the hands. The challenge with all of that is it's highly expensive to develop it. Yes, you can do that, and the technology is there, but it's very, very expensive. So you need to do it on a vast scale to make it cost effective to develop it. But that would be my take on it. I think we can do it. Adam?
Yeah, definitely. But I think that's where you're seeing those specialist platforms really finding those niches again, aren't you? You know, you kind of started with a lot of AI startups trying to be everything for everybody.
Yeah.
And now they're coming back down. You know, you think about, as I mentioned, Colossian is very much in that L&D training space, and that's where it's, you know, it's focusing at the moment, which means that it's our kind of go-to for that. Same with regards to kind of these specialisms in, you know, surgeries and things like that. Those platforms are there. It's just a matter of making sure that you pick the right one that's the correct thing for your kind of wants and needs for your organization and your people, really, Kamel.
Awesome. Thank you. And thanks for that question as well, Kamel. Great question and great thing to explore. So we're going to bring it to a close. Let me just double check the Q&A because I've got a little red dot on the Q&A. Oh, that's the same one from Kamel. Great. So we're going to bring it to a close, and I guess I just want to say thank you to Andy and Adam again for taking the time. As a reminder to everyone, there will be the masterclass series that will be shared. AI is something that is, as I said at the beginning, constantly evolving. Everyone's constantly learning. Everyone is in that phase of experimentation. And take it from me, anybody who says they're an expert in AI, they're probably not telling you the whole truth, because nobody is a real expert in AI. You can be an expert in the technique, the data, that sort of stuff, but it is one of those ever-evolving things. And if I was a betting man, I would say it's probably one of those things that will never fully evolve. It will constantly keep growing, constantly keep doing different things, and constantly be targeted towards different areas. And of course, our specialism is about unlocking the human power of potential, both personally and both within organizations for people. And we are committed to identifying how AI can help our clients achieve and scale quicker, but also do the right things for individuals, do the right thing for performance, and do the right things for people as a whole. But we want to say thank you. Thanks for taking the time. It's great to see as many of you here as possible. And for those of you that couldn't make it but are watching the recording, thank you to you too. We are on hand to answer any questions retrospectively. But I'll bid you all a fond farewell. Enjoy the rest of your week and the weekend when it gets here. And thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.